Welcome and thank you for joining the 9th webinar in the NOBA Success Series. I'm Janelle Schroeder, I'm Regulatory and Sustainability for Intelligent IN, and I'm also a NOBA board member. I've been in the industry since 2006, and I'm passionate about packaging and sustainability in that area. NOBA's mission is to educate, support, and represent the natural and organic personal and home care products industry in order to make a more sustainable world. We're dedicated to identifying, improving, and communicating best practices, ingredient, processing, manufacturing, and packaging for stakeholders. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our NOBA YouTube channel. So please go there and watch it again. You may subscribe to the channel and you can follow us on LinkedIn. We also have Katie on here. She is managing the IT side of things. If you have any questions or problems, she's the one to reach out to. There she is. And I will just move forward with our presentation today. We are fortunate to have with us Balaji Jayaseelan. He has over 15 years of experience leading sustainability programs for multiple B2B and B2C firms. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, a master's degree in environmental management, and an MBA. He currently serves as the Vice President of Sustainability at Berlin Packaging. Today, he will be presenting on the packaging regulation trends at the federal, local, and global levels. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. Balaji, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Janelle. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Balaji Jayaseelan. Thanks for the webinar. I will share my presentation and we will talk a little bit about who we are and most importantly, what is the packaging regulation, and the goal for us is also to see the application of these regulations, and we will go for the Q&A aspect of it. So I will share my screen shortly. Janelle, can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So our agenda today is kind of giving you an overview about, what are the different bills that are really coming up in the current, future, and also something in the horizon as well. And what are the applications behind these particular regulations? And also just providing you a little bit of, what as a company should be doing with respect to these upcoming legislations as well. So it's almost like you don't have to kind of go through this entire section of these legislations reading and then figuring out how do we apply this one? How can we create the competitive advantage with respect to these legislations? And most importantly, where can we start? That's the most important thing as well. So if you look at it in terms of who we are, I'm just going to give you a very short introduction about Berlin Packaging if you're not familiar with us. So we are a hybrid packaging supplier. So we basically provide packaging of every different types, whether it's a bottles or whether it's a drums or pails as an aspect of it. So the definition of a hybrid packaging supplier I'll use it as from an example. If a customer comes to us and says to the fact, we need a particular package, let's say for serving a skincare cream or basically a nutraceutical bottle, we can provide them an existing solutions within the market space, but we can also custom design them. And along with the custom design, we add value added services, like, for example, like the quality involved into that, or the logistics involved, the inventory aspects that is relating with the warehousing. And most importantly, from a sustainability perspective, is that like, how are these brands can differentiate themselves from the market space as well. So just to kind of summarize, we supply more than billions of packaging components. We have wide variety of suppliers worldwide. And most importantly, we are able to understand different markets. Like, we play, the beverage market, we play in the food markets in terms of personal care. So for us, it's really to understand these different markets. And the most important thing is like, how does sustainability play into these ones? So there are different drivers for sustainability in the market today. The dynamics is pretty much changing. So one could be focused with respect to legislation itself. That is what we are covering today. The other component that is driving packaging legislations are packaging in general, not necessarily registrations, are like the retailer trends. And then there is also consumer insights aspect as well, because as the consumers are thinking in certain product categories, we want it to be sustainable, and we would like to understand what are the attributes that can help us to do that as well. So our primary goal is really enabling our customers to provide sustainability packaging and services. And we really have a vision to be the leader in this particular space. And the best thing what we do is really making our brand successful. Like when we work with our customers, whether it's a small startup or whether it's a larger company, we really want to understand the experience of the what is the package going to be delivering, and how can sustainability be a part of that. So the way that we do is a wide variety of services. Like, for example, if a nutraceutical particular customer comes into it, we wanted to give them the trends and insights. So, for example, how does sustainability look from the health and wellness side, the holistic side, the mental side, the social side, and what are the legislative requirements that comes into it, which we will go to talk a little bit in detail. And some of the quantitative tools that we provide. And this becomes a very important component in terms of understanding how do I mitigate my legislation. So for example, we are working with respect to EPR bills. We'll talk a little bit about what it is. So how do I minimize my cost towards to the fact, what kind of product options do they have? What kind of material options do I have? So analyzing these elements requires tools. So we kind of focus upon building some life cycle analysis tools, and also really helping people to understand sustainability is going to be a journey. So how do we build roadmaps towards it? Like, for example, in a short-term roadmap for these legislations, how do I really kind of think about that particular aspect of it? So the awareness part of it. Medium term is what SKUs should I be selecting? And then in the long term is like, how do I address as a brand as a whole? So in a way, we kind of provide elements with respect to how we can approach the market space, not necessarily only from a sustainable way, but also from a cost aspect of it, and also the availability as well, right? Like, the PCR materials, especially when you're looking in the nutraceutical markets, as well as markets that are FDA regulated packaging involved. How do we kind of look into that as well? And then finally, as Janelle mentioned, sustainability is very important to tell the story. How do we put it all together? We really started with an insight, but then how we kind of work together in terms of telling the right story, making sure it's a right claim. How do we substantiate that? But most importantly, how do we see this as an enabler for us to make the next innovative change as we kind of move forward as well? So this is basically our last slide pertaining to who we are. So the way that we do is based on 3 different models. So the first model is circularity. And these models have a direct alignment with legislation. So for example, if our particular state that we are going to be shipping that particular product, we need to have increased recycled content into it, which we'll talk a little bit about some of these states. So there is a circularity aspect of it. And then there is the optimization element involved. Again, there is a direct alignment with legislation. We're going to talk a little bit about EPR. So how do we use these kind of models to really help our clients? And especially if you're in the food space or in the nutraceutical space, it's not only the package component alone. We are also going to be looking in terms of what's the interaction of the food to that package. So if you are in the food space, we're really thinking about, can we extend the life of that particular product using that packaging? So those are sustainability from the end use perspective is what we're going to be talking a little bit about through legislations as well. And then the final thing is, this is a space that's really growing mostly in Europe on the reuse and refill, and slightly also we see in some of the home care space that where we operate is on the reuse and refill as well. So this is kind of the ways that we do it from a very strategic space for our particular clients as well. So now let's kind of level set a little bit in terms of what's happening with respect to legislations. Why are these legislations popping out everywhere across the world? I mean, right now we are heavily focused towards the North America one, but then in Europe as well, you see all these legislations like Green Deal, Waste Act, it's all coming back. So if you really look at, this is basically an hypothesis, right? So there could be other reasons. So some of the things that why we think that these legislations are definitely on an increase, especially if you look plastic as a substrate, right? And number one, which we think is basically is that the consumer sentiments, because when they see these images of plastics washed away in the oceans, or when they see a documentary that is focused on where plastics don't have an infrastructure in certain parts of the world, so there is a rising consumer sentiment, which kind of results in like, can I look at plastics as something that could be managed, right? So that's where you have governments looking into plastics and trying to have these sort of enactment of these legislations at a very different levels. We'll talk a little bit about federal, state, and local. And then you have organizations like, you have Ellen MacArthur Foundations, you have United Nations. They both had a recent pact of working towards a legal treaty to really look upon companies who can probably sign up for these sort of like legislations that would be able to reduce plastic or increase recycled content. So that's another element that's kind of rising as well. And then finally, you have company goals, right? Like there are companies which are really striving to kind of make these elements. So there is these wide arrays of elements that really focuses with respect to these plastic, especially in the plastic area with these regulations. But one of the things we also are looking into it is to really go a little bit deeper, right? Like, because when you look at plastics, there are so many different types of plastics. And one of the things that we tell our customers when we look at these regulations is like, not all the plastics are created equal. There is this availability issue sometimes, and there is this cost issue. And then there is the most important, like, what is the collection issue as well? Like, so for example, the way that we see a PET, the way we see an HDPE, and within HDPE type of a plastic, there is this element of food grade versus non-food grade. So there is this whole element of a background that's going on with the regulations. And then with the regulations, we're kind of looking upon a picture. Okay, there is this rising consumer sentiment. So what really happens? So we'll concentrate a little bit on the North America or United States today, but in the future, we can also talk a little bit upon the European side, from the other side of the pond as well. But if you really look from what's happening in the United States, if you divide by federal, state, and local level, the federal, we don't really have an encompassing bill, right? We really don't have a broad bill that covers with respect to minimizing in terms of what's happening with respect to our packaging regulations. However, from an FDA aspect of it, so let's say if I have a package that has got a food contact, it really enables that if you want to have a recycled content to it, you need to have a product that has got the letter of guarantee, or you need to have a product that has gone through a migration testing, which means that my particular product that I use for food contact needs to have a minimum amount of contaminants into it. So it's almost like an indirect way of influencing, but not really from a broad federal level. But then when we look from a state level, right, this is where there is a lot of action happening. So you have states passing EPR bills, minimum content PCR laws, as well as you have local municipalities and cities starting to work on it. So what has really happened in the market space is that you have several different states starting to work on these particular bills. And based on these bills, so if I am a small manufacturer, or if I'm a medium to a large scale manufacturer, a supply chain is not built around for a particular state. So there is a complexity within, from a practical level, of how do we really address that? So this is why sometimes when we advise our clients, it's like, let's look at this picture to future-proof your brand, right? Let's understand how these regulations can be a part with respect to your decision making, but most importantly, how do we look in terms of minimizing it? So one of the things when we look upon all these regulations, right, like what are they really coming back? What is the fundamental element that these regulations are really trying to say, right? So the most important thing upon some of the common themes that we find in regulation is they want to address issues like, what's your size, what's your weight of your package. So for example, if you look at California, when they did this, what we call it as this non-beverage, non-food grade related packaging in the past, it really started with like, okay, what's the size of the packaging? What's the composition? Are we looking at the PET, number one? Are we looking at HDPE, number two, or polypropylene at number five? It really starts with the packaging specification. And then what are these bills trying to say about it, right? These bills are trying to say about, can you make this package recyclable? Can you make a particular package having a recycled content? Is biodegradability a solution to your package? Like, for example, we might not be able to delve much deeper into this. There are certain states where you can't even term the word biodegradable, right? So it's really going into the nuances of that particular thing. And currently you have bills that are focused on themes like, is advanced recycling is something that we should be considering it. There are 14 states in different state of motion thinking about, is advanced recycling being a part of that? So these are the different attributes we see in these different forms of the bills. The other thing is also is the traceability of this packaging, right? Like this is almost like, for example, is it a food grade PCR or is it a non-food grade PCR, or where does this plastics come from? And like, I'm as a brand owner, should I be knowing about what sort of labeling strategy should I can make, like the RIC codes and things like that? Can I use a triangle symbol, or can I use this different verbiage to communicate it? So you have those themes also developing with respect to legislations as well. And for example, and finally, the traceability, right? So as these legislative things are coming up, as these retailer, we talked a little bit about these drivers coming up. Where is this PCR coming from? Can we certify that? What sort of traceability as a manufacturer would I have to know that my particular product has have a recycled content? So we look at some of these things. When we look at all these different themes with respect to regulations, we see these things kind of aspect as a part of that as well. So we talked a little bit about themes, why there is a background of these regulations. And now let's get into a little bit of these numbers, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about PCR bills, as well as we'll talk a little bit about the EPR bills as a part of it. So as you could see, there are 16 states that they have introduced EPR in 2022. It's one of the fastest things that's happening in terms of what we will talk a little bit about what is an EPR and what does it really mean. I know we are using the word acronyms here. Some of you might not be familiar. So we will define what is an EPR, how does it apply, and what's the background as a part of that as well. And the second thing is we're going to talk a little bit about the recycled content bills, where we see that around 3 different states have passed that particular bill as a part of it. And then 4 different states have passed the EPR in the current state of affairs. Again, as in the next year, if you look at this particular map, it might be of a big change as a part of it. So let's talk a little bit about the recycled content bills. I know I'm kind of rushing sometimes because there's a lot of ground to cover, but I'm just kind of give you a little bit of overview what's happened in the last, I would say, in 3 years down the line. So the first state that we really came is with respect to California with the beverage law, right? So I'm not going to read through the slides, but I'm just going to give you at a high level overview. And also, what are the mitigation and the compliance aspect that if I'm a brand owner or if I'm a manufacturer or if I'm a distributor that I should be concerned about, right? So the first thing is when we are looking in terms of the recycled content bill, it really starts with like, what is the level of PCR that I can add to this particular bottle, right? So it's based on the deposit system. So they're really starting at a very low level. Like, can I have around 15% by 2022 to all the way to 2050? There are some exemptions that you can apply. And there are also certain elements of what is the fines that is related with respect to this content bill as well. So it's really taking let's say, for example, a PET, an HDPE, and within that particular bottles, are we looking in terms of only the bottles or the closure systems and everything as well? But mainly, it really concerns with the bottles as such as well. So once we know that, okay, here is the recycled content that I need to apply, the second aspect is the compliance aspect of that. So the compliance aspect is really like, if I'm the brand owner, how do I really plan around these particular legislations, right? So the legislations can be focused upon like how is the applicability, how is the exposure, how am I sourcing that? And the most important thing is the fact is like, how do I report these particular legislations, and how do I know which directions should I be able to go forward with it as well? And then you have the next stage start to come. Like, okay, now I've looked at the beverage. I have a certain numbers. I've created a model and I've created a template. And then you have state of Washington starting to look beyond beverages and starting to get into what we call like household cleaning and even dairy to a certain extent as well. So again, the aspect of this recycled content builds for these particular categories involves elements like very similar to California, but really looking at extension of product categories, working with respect to, again, these legislations, like, can I have more PCR content added to it? Again, if you look at from a compliance perspective, if I'm the brand owner, I'm looking at what's my applicability. Does my product comply with this particular thing? Or where can I get my PCR from? So these are common questions that we see the brands asking. Can I integrate PCR into my client's portfolio? Can I know how to calculate that as a part of this one? Like, how do I, if I am having 10 different SKUs, how do I really manage that aspect? And then finally, how do I really communicate that? How do I register? There's so many different questions that arises, but these are common questions when a legislative things gets passed. We kind of help our clients as well, but most importantly, this is an element that has to be taught very holistically as we kind of come across with as we pass through each and every state, because it involves supply chain, it involves procurement, but most importantly, it also involves as a brand, how do we communicate as a part of that? The next thing, as you could see, this one, you see my font actually going a little less and less because you see every state learning from another state and also kind of evolving themselves into having these legislations pass further. So the last legislations, which we look at a very high level, is New Jersey. Again, every legislation has got like, a stepwise way, like for example, and also they become more and more hyper specific. So for example, if you look at New Jersey, it not only includes rigid plastics, but for the first time, it also includes glass. So they not only moved away from, yes, plastics are included, but then I'm also going to be including carry-out bags. I'm also going to be including trash bags. And there are certain exemptions around it as well. But if you see, these legislations are getting finer and finer, but also these legislations are also allowing certain exemptions regarding the market conditions as well. So it's really like, you can apply for a certain waiver. You can basically look in terms of my particular product application does not have this. So those are the things that we can consider as a part of these, recycled content legislations as well. Again, for this particular New Jersey law, uh, at a very high level, or any other state, right? So the first thing that really happens is the registration for that particular legislation, for that particular product. So if I'm a brand owner, if I know that I'm subjected to this particular law, I have to start registering. New Jersey have extended this registration to until 2023 as a part of it. So once I register, so let's say I'm a beverage bottle. I'm just kind of walking through as a beverage bottle manufacturer. Okay, I need to understand a 15% PCR that I need to add by 2024. So it gives us a 2-year thing. And then should I add it across? I have 10 SKUs. Should I add it across every SKU? Or can I play with numbers where can I add to a SKU where I'm going to be supplying a lot? So one of the things when we advise our clients with respect to this PCR applicability is that let's look at the overall pounds and let's look at it in terms of based on this overall pounds, let's look at your volume and let's go with 1 or 2 SKUs. Again, it's a very much a decision driven by the cost, the availability of it. And especially if you are in a food grade plastic, there is going to be a little bit more of a higher cost compared to a non-food grade plastics, especially in beverage bottle, which is food grade. You need to make sure to the fact the quality is there for that particular product. You go through that testing aspects of it. So that's the first step in identifying, can I have 15%? But then in the next few years, you're going to have these legislations grow as higher as, like, let's say 25% to all the way to around 50% by 2036. So they always see this, that these legislations, especially with recycled content bills, slowly starting to grind up. So one of the things that we also suggest clients is like, yes, you start at 15, but let's have a sweet spot at 25, because if you're really looking to introduce PCR into your product stream, yes, there is this resin cost that you need to be looking into it. But then there is also this processing involved, right? Because, as a manufacturer or as a converter, you need to think about what sort of quality of the materials that you can, what sort of hopper conditions do you have, how do you mix it. So there's a lot of what we call it is the process conversion cost also involved into it. So one of the ways that we can think about is like, okay, can I have a sweet spot between a 15 to 25% an aspect of that as well. So again, there are some several different strategies that you can think about from a compliance perspective. And we can definitely have multiple ways to kind of mitigate as a part of that. We'll talk a little bit about EPR in the next 5 minutes, and then finally we'll go to the application aspect of it. Uh, EPR, the definition of EPR is what is called extended producer responsibility. At a very high level, what it really means is that as a brand owner, I'm responsible for the product end of life of the product. So, for example, it's my responsibility that I'm looking at this particular product, and if I cannot design this particular product into a sustainability attribute perspective, can I look into this product and basically see is there a fees that I need to pay for it? So, for example, the intent behind EPR is to really improve the collection, sorting, and infrastructure. So what it means is the fact when I'm paying the fees, I will talk a little bit about the organizations that they have to form, or the other elements, the nuances involved into it. But at very high level, what's the objective of EPR? What's the extended producer responsibility needs to be done? It's really to improve recycling rates, is to really rethink about how do we improve our collection. And then finally, how can I increase my recyclability through these concepts like eco-modulation? Again, there are several ways to it. And again, all these from an EPR perspective, there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons about does it really work well? Does it combine with the bottle deposit bills? I mean, there is so many arguments for and against, but just to kind of give you the intent behind EPR is based on really looking in terms of hoping to have a better infrastructure and collection as a part of it. So when they decide to pass an EPR legislation, one of the requirement is that they need to form an organization called a producer responsibility organizations. Again, there are different formats of these organizations, whether it has to be a partnership within the local government and the communities, or it's a privately led. Again, there are a lot of nuances across each and every state, but just to kind of give you at a very high level, there is an organization that it needs to be formed called a producer responsibility organization. And based on the producer responsibility organization, they will basically set up like, okay, how much as a brand owner should I be paying a fee? And generally the fees that's been collected is really used to improve their infrastructure, right? So for example, can I improve the operational cost of it? Can I bring the more outreach to my markets? And the most important thing to the fact is that can I have an investment that I can be able to use as a part to improve the recycled materials, especially those materials where I can have a good use as a secondary life as a part of this particular product. Again, we might not have time to go through each and every nuance as a part of it, but at a very high level, think about an EPR being an extended regulation, and we're going to have a fees, we're going to form an organization, and this particular organization has got a certain task to make. So if you really think about, we talked a little bit about the objectives. Okay, what are the goals? If I am a brand owner, okay, I'm going to pay a fee, and okay, what should I be thinking about, right? So it's really about thinking about, let's say from the state aspect, let's say if I was working for the government, I'm thinking, okay, through EPR, I'm going to increase recycling rates, I'm going to boost my material recovery facilities, I can help the decarbonization of my economy. But if I'm basically looking from the other side of the coin, I'm thinking like, is there a ways for me to reduce my fee? I mean, that's a very fundamental thought. It's a very practical thought. But then I'm also thinking about like, how do I comply with these regulations? But most importantly, how can I create the differentiation in the market space as a part of that? So one of the ways that we always promote is the concept which we talked a little bit earlier about eco-modulation, right? What's the incentive to do an EPR to avoid or mitigate the EPR fees and things like that? Again, this is extremely popular in Europe and especially in France. France is one of the well-done states on EPR, but then there are other, what I call it as countries which have not done really well as well. So But at a very high level, again, we are talking about not about the pros and cons in this particular webinar. We're really talking about what are the ways that these legislations can be looked upon as an opportunity for a brand as well. So the first focus is that can I lightweight my package? Again, lightweighting has been done by for various variety of years. So the first thing is really working with respect to reducing the weight of the packaging through lightweighting. The second thing is that how do we promote a substrate that could be easy collected, recycled? So we talked, I mean, like there are certain plastic types, like for example, PET, HDPE, which have collection rates averaging around 27 to 28%. So through using of this particular program, can we improve the collection areas for that? And then finally, the most important thing is, as a brand, how do I educate people? Can I make a system reusable? Can I make a circular? We talked a little bit about our strategies about reuse and refill. Is there an opportunity for my brand to create that? Is there an opportunity for my brand to create an educational campaign to talk about my product? So it really is an opportunity also from an internally from a brand perspective to kind of do that. So how do I kind of meet the EPR requirements? So we talked a little bit about eco-modulation. We talked a little bit about some of the effective solutions that we can kind of look upon it. And the most importantly, it's really think about like a matrix lever, right? If I move towards the left-hand side or to the up, I'm going to pay a lower fee. So which means that I should be thinking about my product strategy from the design stage. Or if I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to pay a fine. Or what is that fine going to be? It's always the trade-off. So again, sustainability, if you really see, especially on the packaging side, it's really about managing trade-offs. And this is EPR is another big element to think about, how much money or how much strategies, how many strategies can I do to kind of implement that? Again, I just put a couple of laws here, like, California has done an EPR law in 2024. It's going to take a while because they need to set up these organizations. They need to look in terms of what is the funding that they're planning to get. They're looking around $150 million that they're planning to collect. Sorry, 500 million from the CPG and 150 million. Again, these numbers can be subjected to change within the next 10 years, but I'm just going to give you some essence. So Colorado is a little bit cautious. They're given the first 18 months to really understand how do we really set up a statewide. They really want to understand the gap analysis of the infrastructure program and then try to get through it. And there is also other EPR laws. I just called a couple of laws just to see the flavor for it as of today. And one of the ways that to mitigate these EPR, to improve the PCR content, is really trying to help the brand owner create that language behind it, right? Like, for example, how can I mitigate it? So one of the ways that we have seen is using the concept of life cycle analysis, right? Life cycle analysis is really trying to understand how can you improve your product from a sustainability point of view. So let's say an EPR bill passes or a minimum PCR bill passes. I'm a brand owner. Now I'm introducing 25% recycled content. So let's kind of think in that particular perspective. And I'm also reducing my weight. So I'm using that same principles as an EPR. Like, okay, I'm reducing my weight. I'm increasing my PCR even to 100%. I'm also looking at optimization, several different opportunities from our transportation. And as a result of doing all these things, we are also able to get the most decarbonized product as well. So there's one of the things that we also tell our prospective clients is like, yes, legislations is a differentiator, but also use that as an opportunity to also look at your existing carbon because they're all very interrelated. And as you could see from this small example that what we are presenting in this, like a nutraceutical containers that we have done, an increase in 50% PCR results in reduction of your carbon by 40% in your SKU. So these are the different things that you can also use to communicate. Again, many people may not be associating with greenhouse gases or climate change. They might still feel that, oh, it's too technical for us. And there are also better ways to communicate. We talked a lot about educational campaigns about EPRs, right? So some of the ways that you can communicate is like, as a brand, I'm reducing X% of PCR by 50%, which means that I'm taking 40 cars off the road with respect to emissions as a part of it as well. Again, this is my last slide. And the whole idea about really putting all the things together is there are legislations, there are the drivers of these legislations that will keep to continue to rise. And how do we see that legislation as an opportunity is the most important element. And then once we see there as an opportunity, how do we programmatically design that aspects of it, like, creating short term, medium, and as well as long term. And then finally, how do we kind of create a program that could be also used as an opportunity to educate others, but and also most importantly, try to create a package that has got not only sustainability trade-offs on choosing the right sustainability opportunities, but also using that to see what's my cost, what's my availability, and trying to balance that particular element to address these particular legislations as well. I'll stop my presentation and I'll open up to Q&As as possible.
Balaji, that was some really good information. I thank you so much. I really liked the slide that showed the impact where the more PCR content, for example, the more you're following the sustainability, the less you end up having to pay in at the end of the life cycle, basically. So
Right.
by doing better in that way, it may cost you a little bit here, but it saves you down here. And
Absolutely.
also it looks better for everyone involved, doesn't it?
Right, exactly, Kate.
Yeah. Katie put in the said, go ahead and post any questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. I know that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people are chewing on it right now, trying to digest it and figure out what all that means. But I like what you were saying about utilizing your packaging house to provide, for example, the life cycle assessment on your packaging. Then you can very easily translate that into usable bites for your consumers. They can see, what it is that you are doing as a brand, and then how they are supporting, as a consumer when they make that purchase, that choice to buy my shampoo versus somebody else's shampoo. If everything was equal in the goop, maybe they'll choose our packaging over theirs because of these extra fuzzy things that come with it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very true. I mean, like, it's really, you have to give the credit in terms of, like, if I'm doing certain change, how do I communicate that well, but also look at the holistic way in terms of sustainability, and also understand trade-offs, right? You can't be green immediately, like the incremental steps for you to get over there, but eventually that's the roadmap that we really advise all our clients to get there. We'll get there slow and steady. So
yeah, that's a good way to approach it. And if you can explain to your consumers your timeline and your plans and your goals, then they can follow you on that journey. And also, I think it's important to explain to consumers any setbacks you might find, run against. Oh, there's not enough PCR content for my bottle available.
absolutely. I mean, that's where these legislations are also coming up as well, where the market wants to know, like, there is no availability, especially if you are in the food grade PCR, the availability is a little bit more limited. So the market wants to understand that. So that is why sometimes I feel like, yeah, it's all not about the roses that you want to talk about. It also wants to talk about the challenges this is what our journey is. We are struggling in this particular thing, and we're going to take some time. And that's why, as you see these legislations getting drawn, they're getting to know more and more about the companies and about the challenges. And they are and they're really trying to do a good job about, let's understand the market. But the other side is also is like, as a company, we are also trying to create that differentiation, right? Like, let us be transparent and let us balance everything, the cost and availability as a part of that story as well. So
I actually have a quick question. We've heard from a lot of brands that we work with, and ourselves too, this backlog of packaging. Do you have any insight to that?
backlog,
Everything's out of stock.
Oh, because of shipping from China and things like that.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the substrate level, right? So if you look at from a substrate level, there is glass, and then there is this plastic, right? So within the plastic, things are getting better. And within that particular plastic, let's say if you want to do a sustainability-based plastics, right? You have non-food grade PCR and PCR, right? So when you look at from a backlog as an element of this, things are opening up with plastics because there is a lot of players around it. And for us, we deal with more than 2,000 suppliers. I mean, like when we deal with those suppliers, we are able to understand what's the US domestic capacity as well as what is away from that. And plastics tends to be much, much better, right, from an outlook perspective. If you're looking at glass, there is so many factors that goes into a glass, right? You don't have a preform where you blow up something. It's really takes some time. And with the shortage with respect to glass, but then there is also this element of the gas, right? With the wars that's happening around. So there is a lot of things that is really driving certain aspects of it. And there is the shortage, and also supply chain has been a very on and off in the last 6 months. So it's like almost like when you look at the market, yes, plastics is a little bit much better. Glass is getting better, but again, it all depends upon what type of glass do you want, what is the elements that is required. It's a long answer for each and every substrate, but it's also very nuanced what type of plastic and what type of plastic within the sustainability space. And within that sustainability space, what is your goal that you would like to achieve? So we have almost like a scale. So as our customers come say, okay, asking those design briefs and asking those questions, and then we can say, yes, we can provide it. But then this one is like, okay, there is a lead time, there is a developmental aspect involved into it. Sorry if the answer is too long.
No, I mean, it's complicated. There's a lot of factors that affect everything to get it overseas, not just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the getting PCR content, valuable PCR content is a challenge because the recycling rate in the United States is pretty low, at the consumer level. Take back programs and things like that can help, but now we're hearing more about the concept of advanced recycling, where it's not mechanical chipped up plastic anymore. It's separating the chemicals and then making it into new plastic that way. So I'm real curious how that's gonna play out in the future here.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a little bit of a complementary to it, right? Like, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a complementary to that as well. So, like for example, mechanical recycling plastics, definitely, PET, HDPE, you grind it up into some chemical is, I think if it's 3 to number 7, right? That's what I kind of say to the fact. You are turning that, I use this analogy as a microwave oven, but that's a way that is actually being done, but it's really the analogy. You take a particular plastic, which you should not be able to mechanically recycle, because that you're not going to take that great homogeneous stream. You're taking a heterogeneous stream of this plastic, you put it in the microwave oven, and the microwave oven converts that into a liquid because you're heating it at this one. Then you take the liquid, put it into a distillation tower, and make a monomer out of it. So it should be almost like a complement of this one. But if they are starting to get into this mechanical recycling, it's not about getting into it. You're really losing that valuable elements as what a mechanical recycling PET or an HDPE can provide. So, but I see it's a very complementary space, but again, the technology is new, right? There's a lot to learn. There's a climate change impact that we need to consider as a part of that particular thing. Again, it's the trade-off decisions that may come into the picture, but then there is also a lot of innovations happening in the space as well. So I'm always optimistic about these technologies, but I'm also saying that let's learn more and let's take it one at a time. So
yeah, because then there's also waste to energy, my favorite.
yes, exactly. Yeah. That's another.
I'd rather see chemical recycling than waste to energy, I think. But
Right,
I'm not sure. Is that the right way to go? I don't know. Maybe it just
So
depends on the type of plastic.
So it's really again, what are we comparing chemical recycling? I think there should be a pivot shift. Should I be comparing it with mechanical, or should I be comparing it with waste to energy, right? So mechanical, just from a carbon perspective, let's look at from a carbon emission, right? So waste to energy, yes, it gives me that energy, It helps me to do that. But here with mechanical recycling, I'm able to get a particular product that could be used again. So that's the nuanced. I don't want to get into the chemical engineering of it, like what are the different types of the things that comes in chemical. But again, that's the study that needs to happen, right? Pyrolysis versus waste to energy, and what does it really compare it with? We are doing a lot of interesting work on that as well, to see which is better, which is not better. But I'll leave it at that right now. So
Very cool, very cool. Okay, Katie, do you have any questions? Any other questions? No?
No, I think he's touched on it all.
Did he though?
We should let him get to bed in Milan.
Whatever you can touch on in an hour. Is there anything else, Balaji, that you'd like to say?
I don't know, Janelle, but thank you very much for you and Katie for allowing me to present. Again, this is a little bit of a dry and a very complicated topic because of numbers in this one. And if there is any members or the people in the webinar who want to reach out to just a little bit more understand, more than happy to do that, because trying to get a regulation lesson within the 30 minutes, I'm telling you, it's the most boring and more complicated. But at a very high level, I just want to complete it by saying that there is always an opportunity as well with these regulations, and how do we kind of build it is what we would like to see our clients do as well as our customers do. So.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Katie. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.